everyone, this is James from Mission. Today we're talking about the Gemini 1P passive 4-range cab, and we're using it with the Kemper Profiling amp. So here's our setup. On the top here we have this Kemper Profiling amp, which is in the head configuration. They have both an amp head and a rack mount configuration, and we'll talk about the rack mount one here in a minute, but this is the head type configuration. It's also the version that has the inbuilt power amp, so as well as the modeling section in here, there's a power amp section in here as well, and we have the power amp section connected to this full range passive cab. Later on we're going to switch it around and we're going to show you how it's connected up. The concept here is that the passive cab here is specifically designed to work with modeling amps, and it has a particular type of driver configuration in here to support the kind of frequency response that is necessary with this type of configuration. So because it's a modeling amp, it's capable of modeling not only amps and effects, but it can also model other parts of the signal chain, including cabinets and speakers that would typically be used in a guitar type configuration. And in order to model that correctly and represent that correctly when you're playing it back live, you need a speaker cabinet that's actually able to represent those frequencies in that modeled speaker cabinet without adding any of its own components. Normally in a guitar speaker cabinet, the cabinet and the speaker driver themselves are designed to work together with a guitar amp and add characteristics to the tone. But in this case you're modeling a different type of speaker cabinet, and so you don't want the real physical speaker cabinet to add characteristics to the tone, because that will mess up your modeling. So how do we do it? Well, the way it's done is that we take a physical configuration that's very like a standard guitar speaker cabinet, so it has the same format that we're all used to, and it's built extremely strongly. It's very robust. You can carry it around with you, you can take it to gigs, you can put it in a flight case, and you can put it on an airplane. It has the connectivity that you would normally expect to see on a guitar amp, which, as I say, we'll look at in a minute. But internally it's completely different. It's built much more like a monitor or even a hi-fi stereo speaker. Rather than one speaker driver in here, there's actually two, and this is how we're able to model or able to represent the models of the full frequency range. So we actually have a low frequency driver and a high frequency driver, aka a woofer and a tweeter, but they're configured slightly differently. The tweeter is actually mounted in the center of the woofer, so this gives us a couple of advantages. One, the angle of dispersion is much wider than you would normally expect to get with a separate woofer and tweeter. So this means that when you're using it live, you get a much wider spread out across the live audience. This means you don't have to sit exactly in front of the speaker in order to get the full speaker range. You won't lose a massive amount of the top end as you slide towards the left or the right. So that's much better for a live speaker. It also works in the other axis, so it spreads much better up and down. So that means if you're using it a monitor and you're standing up and it's down below you, you also get a wider spread of those frequencies. The other thing it does is, of course, it makes everything feel or sound like it's coming from the same point. So in a big cabinet like this, if you had the woofer over here and the tweeter over here, there'd be quite a big physical separation between the two, and so you'd end up hearing that different location from the high frequencies and the low frequencies, which makes it sound a little bit odd. So by putting those two together in the same axis, it sounds like it's coming from the same point, which is much more natural. Also, because of the way that they're mounted with the high frequency coming out of the center, it means you can treat this in a miking environment much more like you would a regular guitar speaker cabinet. So we can put a mic on this, and as you move it more on axis, because you're coming closer to the tweeter, you'll actually get more high frequency, and as you move it further away, you'll actually get a little bit less high frequency. Now, because of the dispersion, it's not exactly the same as you get with a regular guitar cab, but you can certainly achieve some of that effect by moving the mic around. So you can mic it up much more like a regular speaker. Alright, so we've switched the cab and the amp around so we can see the back panel. So let's see how we connect it up. On the back of the Kemper, we just have this single output here, which is our power amp on the Kemper. Now, depending on what type of configuration is that you're using, if you're using a modeling device and then a separate power amp, you'll have an output from that power amp going this way, and you may have multiple, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But for the moment, in this configuration, we just have the Kemper with a single power amp output right there. On the back of the Gemini, we have two connections here, and they're marked input and output. The input is where we're going to connect up here in a second. Real quick, let's talk about these connections. So these are combo connections, and they support two types of cable, two types of connector, which is speak on and then 1/4 inch. So the 1/4 inch is this one here. This is the one which we'll commonly see, and it's just a guitar cable. I think this is just a Mission guitar cable I'm using here. The other type of connection is a speak on cable, and that's a special type of speaker connection that they commonly use in PAs and monitors. And you can push that in and twist it, and that locks it in. And we support both on here, and they're supported through this combo connection. So if you have a speak on cable, you can push it in there, lock it, and that'll keep it in there nice and safe. If you don't, you can just use one of these, and that's what I'm going to use here right now. So we'll plug this into the output from our Kemper Profiler, and we'll plug this into the input, and that's it. Pretty much all of us can manage that without too much difficulty. That's the only connection that we have to make. Now let's talk quick about the output on here. So the output allows me to chain together two Gemini passive cabs with this single configuration. So I only have one output here, I only have one cable. If I want to put that signal into multiple cabs in order that I can spread the field out a little bit on a wide stage, or maybe I want to build myself a stack, so I want to put two of these on top of each other and then this guy on the top, I can do that. I just put another connection in here, and I put that to the input of the second cab, so I can link those two together. One thing to be especially careful of when you do that, and it's marked on the back here, and I recommend reading the manual before you do this, is that the speaker rating in here, the speaker setting is for 8 ohms, which is pretty common for guitar type power amps. And we'll see on the back here of the Kemper that it says it's rated from 8 to 16 ohms. Now, if you use this configuration here and you put two 8 ohm speakers in parallel, you'll end up with a 4 ohm configuration. And you can only use that with power amps that are going to support 4 ohms. In this case, the Kemper's rated at 8 to 16, so you can't use that for this particular power amp configuration. If you use a power amp that does support 4 ohms, then you can plug two of these together with the output. So very important to check that. If you can't support 4 ohms, don't use that connection. But what you can do is, if you have a power amp that has multiple channels, you can actually run one channel of the power amp to multiple ones of these. If you have a 4-channel power amp, you can run each channel to one of these, and you can run 4 of these together. Alright, so a couple of other quick things. I did mention that if you don't have a Kemper head and you have a rack mount unit, either a Kemper rack mount unit or a similar modeler that fits into a 19-inch rack, we do have another product called the Gemini H. Gemini H is this 19-inch rack unit that's designed to work with the Gemini cabinets and sits nicely on the top. In this case, I've got an 11 rack in here. Now, because the 11 rack doesn't have a power amp on, I can't connect it directly to here. If I had a rack mount Kemper in here with a power amp in it, I could just connect it directly up to the cabinet. But there is this 2U space under here. In the Gemini H, you can remove this. The little screws on the back where you can just take it off, and you can slide in a rack mount power amplifier. Then you can connect your 11 rack up to your power amplifier, and then you can come out of your power amplifier into the Gemini, and that will work perfectly well with any combination of rack mount modeler and rack mount power amp. Alright, and last of all, I thought I would just show you this, which is the Gemini protective cover. We have one of these for each of the different models. So there's one for the 1x12, there's one for the 2x12 stereo configuration, and then there's also one for the rack head. This is specifically designed for the Gemini products. It's a ballistic nylon, so it's extremely strong. It's quilted and padded inside, so it will give you some pretty good protection. It has a little tab underneath here that slides underneath the handle so that it protects the top when you're carrying it around. It's very light, it's very reasonably priced, and it'll do a great job of protecting your Gemini.